It all started with a simple idea, or maybe it wasn't simple at all. Joel Bieber, who always had these crazy schemes, declared that our summer was getting boring. He said we needed a real adventure, something to tell our grandkids about. His grand plan? A weekend trip to Bear Creek? He sold it to us like it was a 5-star resort, not a patch of woods with a questionable stream running through it. "Guys, this is it," he'd said, his eyes wide with excitement. "This will be the weekend that defines our friendship." I should have known then that we were doomed. The rest of us, Aidan Catcher, Aidan Kroll and me, Greg, just sort of nodded along. What could possibly go wrong? The planning session was pure chaos. Joel was pacing around his basement, which smelled faintly of old pizza and broken dreams. He had a huge map of Bear Creek spread out on a ping-pong table. "Okay, so our mission, should we choose to accept it, is to conquer this wilderness," he announced. Aidan Catcher, who was busy trying to balance a spoon on his nose, just muttered, "I'm not doing that." Joel ignored him. He started talking about our future plans, how this trip was just training for backpacking Machu Picchu next year. We all knew that was never going to happen. We could barely coordinate a trip to the mall. Our packing list was a disaster. I brought the essentials, a sleeping bag, a flashlight, and my Lucky Dapper Dan action figure. Don't ask. It was a weird gift from my uncle, and I figured it might bring us some luck. Joel brought a single can of beans and a 20-pound portable speaker. Aidan Kroll, ever the tech geek, packed 3 power banks and a drone he called the Eye in the Sky. Aidan Catcher apparently thought we were going to a fashion show because he packed 3 different flannel shirts and a bottle of expensive cologne. He looked at my action figure and said, "You brought a toy?" I just shrugged. It felt like a good idea at the time. As we piled into Joel's beat-up minivan, the energy was electric. We were blasting music, shouting over each other, and generally acting like a bunch of lunatics. Joel put his arm around me and said, "Greg, my man, we're gonna have a time." I wasn't so sure. The van already smelled like Aidan Catcher's cologne, and we hadn't even left the driveway. Louis Brown, who was meeting us there, sent a text that just said, "Hope you guys are ready for the country of Bear Creek." It sounded more like a threat than an invitation. This whole trip felt like a bad idea, but hey, you gotta have fun, right? We arrived at Bear Creek just as the sun was setting. The place was rustic, and by rustic I mean it was just a bunch of trees and dirt. There wasn't even a proper campsite, just a clearing that looked like a bear might have recently used it as a bathroom. "Welcome to paradise," Joel shouted, spreading his arms wide. Aidan Kroll immediately started setting up his tech gear, while Aidan Catcher complained about the lack of cell service. I just stood there, clutching my Dapper Dan figure a little tighter. The woods were already making weird noises, and the shadows were getting long and spooky. I was starting to seriously regret coming here. Night 1 was, to put it mildly, freaky. The moment it got dark, everything changed. The chirping crickets sounded like tiny monsters, and every rustle in the leaves was obviously a serial killer or a ghost. We managed to get a small fire going, but it just seemed to make the shadows dance in more terrifying ways. Louis Brown, who had arrived just before us, was trying to act all tough and outdoorsy, but even he looked a little spooked. "It's just the wind, guys," he said, though his voice was a little shaky. Joel, of course, was completely unfazed. He was trying to roast his single can of beans directly in the fire, which seemed like a terrible idea. Things took a turn for the worse when Aidan Kroll decided to fly his drone. "I'll do a perimeter sweep," he said, like he was in some kind of action movie. The drone, with its glowing red lights, looked like an alien spaceship hovering over our camp. It whirred and buzzed, adding another layer of creepy noise to the night. Suddenly it shot straight up and then came plummeting down, crashing into a tree somewhere in the darkness. "My eye in the sky," Aidan wailed. He looked genuinely heartbroken. We all just stared into the blackness where his expensive toy had disappeared. The freaky night was officially in full swing. Later, huddled around the weak fire, the paranoia really set in. Joel turned to Louis and asked, "How's your dad doing?" It was such a random, out-of-place question that it just made everything weirder. Louis, looking confused, just said, "He's fine." We all sat in awkward silence for a minute, listening to the sounds of the night. I swear I heard something whisper my name. I was convinced we weren't alone out there. This wasn't just a camping trip anymore. It was a survival mission. And I had a sinking feeling that not all of us were going to make it out with our sanity intact. The next morning, after a mostly sleepless night, Aidan Kroll was still mourning his drone. To distract himself, he brought up his favorite topic, artificial intelligence. "You know," he started, poking at the dead fire with a stick, "what if we combined every AI? Like every single one, ChatGPT, Google's AI, all of them, into one superbrain." We all just stared at him. Joel Bieber, ever the instigator, immediately jumped on the idea. "Dude, yes, we could call it the General. It would know everything. It could solve all our problems." He was getting that crazy look in his eye again, the one he gets right before he suggests something truly idiotic. Aidan Catcher scoffed, "Yeah, Or it could decide humanity is a virus and wipe us all out. Have you seen any movie ever? But Aiden Cruel was already lost in the fantasy. No man, think about it. We could ask it anything. Like, where's my drone, or what's the meaning of life? Or why does Louis Brown act so weird sometimes? Louis, who was trying to filter water from the creek using a dirty sock, shot him a glare. Leave me out of this, you nerd. The conversation was getting weirdly intense for 8 AM in the middle of the woods. I just wanted some breakfast that wasn't a fire-charred can of beans. The debate raged on. Joel argued that the general would be a benevolent ruler, a digital god who could plan the perfect backpacking trip to Machu Picchu for us. Aiden Cruel started sketching out a flowchart in the dirt, explaining how the different AIs would integrate. We'd have to create a system of checks and balances, of course, he said seriously. Aiden Catcher just rolled his eyes. You guys are insane. I'm going to find some real food. He wandered off into the woods, probably in search of a non-existent Starbucks. I was starting to think that combining all our brains might be a worse idea than combining all the AIs. Finally, Louis Brown chimed in with a surprising thought. But what if the AI got it wrong? What if it told you something you didn't want to hear, like, you're going bald, or your friends secretly hate you? That shut everyone up for a second. We all kind of looked at each other, wondering. The idea of an all-knowing AI suddenly seemed a lot less fun. Joel broke the silence. Well, the general would never say that. He'd be cool. He'd be on our side. But the seed of doubt was planted. Maybe some things are better left unknown. And maybe, just maybe, we were all losing our minds out here in Bear Creek. After the great AI debate, we decided we needed to actually do something. Joel suggested we go on a hike. Let's explore the country of Bear Creek, he declared. His leadership style was mostly just shouting enthusiastic things until we gave in. So, we started walking. For the first 10 minutes, it was fine. Then, we entered a part of the woods where the trees were super tall and thin, growing really close together. It was dense and kind of disorienting. Louis Brown, who was walking in front, stopped and looked around. I feel like I'm walking through a bamboo forest, he said, his voice echoing slightly. It really did feel like that. The bamboo forest seemed to go on forever. Every direction looked the same. The sunlight barely trickled through the canopy, and it was getting hard to tell which way we had come from. Aiden Catcher, who had returned empty-handed from his food search, was starting to panic. Are we lost? Joel, do you have any idea where we're going? Joel, trying to look confident, just pointed vaguely to his left. Of course I do. This way. We followed him for another 20 minutes, only to end up back in the same spot. We knew it was the same spot because of a weirdly shaped rock that looked like a potato. This is when the finger-pointing started. This is all your fault, Joel, Aiden Catcher yelled. You and your stupid adventure, Joel fired back. My fault. You're the one who navigates using cologne scents. Louis, trying to be the voice of reason, said, Guys, calm down. Panicking won't help. But it was too late. We were officially lost. I pulled out my Dapper Dan figure and held it up. Maybe Dapper Dan can guide us, I said, mostly as a joke. No one laughed. The situation was getting tense. I was starting to wonder if we'd have to live in this bamboo forest forever, surviving on bugs and regret. Aiden Cruel, ever the problem solver, had an idea. Okay, we need to think logically. We came from that way. He pointed in a direction that looked exactly like all the other directions. We were completely turned around. The playful, chaotic vibe of the trip was quickly turning into genuine scary chaos. We were a bunch of idiots lost in the woods with no map, no compass, and a rapidly dwindling supply of snacks. This was not the epic adventure Joel had promised. This was just a masterclass in how not to go camping. The bamboo forest seemed to be mocking us with its endless identical trees. As we stood there, lost and arguing, I clutched my Dapper Dan action figure for comfort. It was a stupid little piece of plastic, but honestly, it was all I had. Joel, in a moment of peak frustration, just snatched it out of my hand. What is this thing even for? He yelled. Is he going to use his plastic powers to save us? Then he started waving it around dramatically. Oh, look at me. I'm Dapper Dan. I'm so dapper I can find my way out of any forest. I mean, it was a pretty good impression, I have to admit, but I was not in the mood. Give it back, Joel, I shouted. What happened next was kind of a blur of clumsy, flailing limbs. I lunged for the action figure, but Joel sidestepped. He tripped over a root, and Dapper Dan went flying through the air in a perfect, tragic arc. We all watched in slow-motion horror as it landed with a soft plop right in the middle of a giant mud puddle. There was this moment of stunned silence. My lucky charm, my beacon of hope, was now submerged in brown goo. Aiden Catcher actually gasped. Oh my god, he killed Dapper Dan, he whispered. It was a truly low moment for the team. The mood immediately soured. I trudged over to the mud puddle and fished out the action figure. He was covered in filth. His little plastic suit was ruined. I felt a surprisingly deep sense of loss. You see what you did? I said to Joel, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and absurdity. You've cursed us! Dapper Dan was our only hope. Joel actually looked a little guilty. I didn't mean to, he mumbled. I'm stressed, man. We were all stressed. We were lost, hungry, and now, our only source of imaginary luck was desecrated. This moment became known as Dapper Dan's downfall. It was the point where we all realized how truly pathetic our situation was. We were fighting over a toy while being lost in the wilderness. I just shook my head and said, I can't believe this is my life right now. Aiden Cruel tried to be optimistic. Hey, at least we have a landmark now. The puddle of despair where Dapper Dan met his end. It wasn't funny, but we all let out a weak chuckle. It was either that or cry. The downfall of Dapper Dan was a symbol of our own downfall. We were a mess. After the Dapper Dan incident, we were at an all-time low. We sat on a log, completely defeated. That's when Joel, in a stroke of what he probably thought was genius, decided to invoke his AI creation. This is a job for the General, he announced. We all looked at him, confused. The AI we invented this morning? He's not real, Joel, Aiden Catcher said flatly. But Joel was totally committed to the bit. He closed his eyes, put his fingers to his temples, and started speaking in this low, robotic voice. Initializing, the General is online. State your query, mortals. It was so ridiculous that it was almost brilliant. Okay, General, Joel continued in his normal voice. We're lost. Where do we go? He then switched back to his robot voice. Calculating optimal path. Based on solar positioning and Moss distribution on arboreal structures, you are hopelessly lost. A few of us couldn't help but snicker. Joel, as the General, kept going with his diagnosis. Your leader, Joel Bieber, is an incompetent fool. Your reliance on a plastic totem, Dapper Dan, was illogical. Your only hope is to follow the one known as the Lil Immigrant Lou. He pointed a stiff, robotic arm at me. I looked both annoyed and honestly a bit intrigued. Now, suddenly appointed leader by a fictional AI being channeled by our most chaotic friend, I sighed. Fine, whatever. Let's just try to backtrack. I guess I took my new role as Lil Immigrant Lou with a weird sense of purpose. I started walking, and for the first time, it actually felt like we had a direction. The others followed, with Joel occasionally chiming in. The General approves of this course of action. It was completely absurd, but it broke the tension. We were still lost, but now we were lost on a mission from a fake superintelligence. Honestly, it was a slight improvement. Following me felt different. I walked with a quiet confidence, occasionally stopping to look at a tree or a patch of moss. I don't know if I actually knew what I was doing, or if I was just better at pretending than Joel was, but everyone followed without question. The General had spoken. Even Aiden Catcher, the biggest skeptic, seemed content to let someone else take charge. Maybe Joel's crazy idea wasn't so crazy after all. Maybe what we needed wasn't a real map, but a shared delusion to get us moving again. The General was in command, and for now that was enough. As we followed our newly appointed leader, Lil Immigrant Lou, the conversation turned kind of reflective. Maybe it was the exhaustion, or the fact that we had just surrendered our fate to a fake AI, but we started talking about our mistakes. Aiden Cruel brought up a legendary figure from our school days, Wallace Chadwick. You guys remember Wallace Chadwick? He asked. We all groaned. Wallace was famous for one thing, a spectacularly failed science fair project involving a potato clock that somehow caught on fire. He was a cautionary tale, a symbol of good intentions gone horribly wrong. We're pulling a Wallace Chadwick right now, Aiden Cruel said. He was totally right. This whole trip was our flaming potato clock. It started with a simple, ambitious idea, an epic adventure, and had devolved into a mess of chaos, mud-covered toys, and fake AI gods. Joel, for once, was quiet. He seemed to be genuinely thinking about our failures. I just wanted us to have a good time, he said softly. You know, make some memories. Aiden Catcher patted him on the back. Oh, we're making memories all right. I'll never forget the image of Dapper Dan drowning in that puddle. That seared into my brain forever. It was a backhanded compliment, but, you know, it was a compliment nonetheless. Still leading the way, I overheard them. You guys are thinking about this all wrong, I said, not even turning around. Wallace Chadwick became a legend because he failed so spectacularly. No one remembers the kid who made a working volcano. Everyone remembers the kid who set a potato on fire. It was a weirdly profound bit of wisdom, honestly. I was suggesting that our failures were more interesting than our successes. That this disaster of a trip was, in its own way, a legendary story in the making. We were no longer just lost idiots. We were future legends of failure. That thought changed the mood again. We started laughing, remembering other times we had messed up. Like the time we tried to build a raft and it immediately sank, or the time Joel tried to dye his hair blonde and it turned orange. Our friendship wasn't built on perfect moments. It was built on a foundation of shared embarrassments. This trip to Bear Creek was just another brick in that glorious, crumbling wall. Wallace Chadwick may have failed, but he was remembered. And as we followed me through the endless trees, we felt a strange sense of pride in our own magnificent failure. Just as we were starting to accept our fate as permanent residents of the bamboo forest, Aidan Krul had another one of his tech-inspired ideas. "Wait a minute," he exclaimed, stopping so abruptly that I almost walked into him. "My drone!" When it was flying, it was recording. It was creating a digital breadcrumb trail of its flight path. A spark of hope ignited within our weary group. Even after it crashed, the flight data should be saved on my phone. If we can find the drone, I might be able to retrace its path back to the campsite. It was a long shot, but honestly, it was the first real plan we'd had all day. The search was on. Our new mission, find the fallen eye in the sky. We fanned out, calling out to each other as we pushed through the dense undergrowth. It felt like a real search and rescue operation, except, the victim was a piece of plastic and electronics. "I think it went this way," Joel shouted, pointing with the confidence only he could muster after being proven wrong so many times. We followed his lead, our eyes scanning the trees and the forest floor. The forest, which had felt so menacing before, now felt like a puzzle we could actually solve. We had a purpose again. After about 30 minutes of searching, just as we were about to give up, I spotted something. "Up there," I yelled, pointing to a high branch on a massive oak tree. There it was, tangled in the leaves, one of its red lights still faintly blinking. The eye in the sky was found. The problem was, it was about 50 feet up. "Now what?" Aidan Catcher asked, hands on his hips. "None of us can climb that." Joel got this mischievous glint in his eye. "I've got an idea," he said, and we all groaned. Joel's ideas were the reason we were in this mess in the first place. His plan was to throw rocks at the branch until the drone fell down. It was a stupid, primitive plan, but honestly, it was the only one we had. So, for the next 15 minutes, the five of us stood under a tree, chucking rocks into the air like a tribe of confused monkeys. Rocks rained down around us, and we had to keep dodging them. It was chaotic, dangerous, and incredibly dumb. Finally, a well-aimed rock from Aidan Krul hit the branch just right. The drone wobbled and then came crashing down, landing on a soft pile of leaves. We had our breadcrumb trail. We cheered like we had just won the World Series. Following the drone's flight data on Aidan Krul's phone was surprisingly easy. It led us straight back to our campsite, which honestly had never looked so beautiful. We collapsed on the ground, exhausted but victorious. We had faced the wilderness and, through a combination of dumb luck, fake AI and teamwork, we had survived. We decided to pack up and get out of there. Our grand adventure at Bear Creek was officially over. The ride home was much quieter than the ride there. We were all tired, dirty, and covered in scratches, but we were smiling. We decided to salvage what was left of the weekend with a proper Sunday fun day. We went to a burger joint, ordered way too much food, and just sat there, recounting the events of the past 2 days. We laughed about the general, about Dapper Dan's tragic demise, and about our pathetic rock-throwing skills. In the bright, fluorescent lights of the restaurant, the whole experience already felt like a strange dream. Joel said between bites of his burger, that was the best worst trip ever. We all had to agree. It was a complete disaster, but it was disaster. As we were leaving, Joel turned to me and said something that actually made sense. "What is life, he asked, looking surprisingly philosophical. "It's just a series of moments, man. You gotta make them count." It was a cheesy line, but coming from him, after everything we'd just been through, it felt true. Our trip to Bear Creek was definitely a moment that counted. It was stupid and chaotic, and we almost got permanently lost, but we did it together. We had faced the bamboo forest and emerged as slightly dumber, slightly wiser friends. That night, back in my own bed, I cleaned the mud off my Dapper Dan action figure. He looked a little worse for wear, but he had survived, just like us. I put him on my nightstand, a trophy from our wild adventure. The trip was a total failure by any normal standard. We didn't conquer the wilderness. The wilderness mostly just confused and terrified us. But we had a story to tell, a ridiculous, unbelievable story of chaos and friendship. And as I drifted off to sleep, I knew that despite everything, I wouldn't have traded it for anything. After all, you gotta have fun.